They've been spiking the purple Kool-Aid since October of 2012. And who wants to listen to that? It's the EMAWdio podcast. And now, here are your hosts, Grant Thome and Doug Rocheleau.
Welcome to the EMAWdio podcast. I'm your host, Grant Thome.
And I'm your co-host, Doug Rocheleau.
And the band is back together for season 5. Doug, I suckered you into one more podcast.
One more. I've got a cold. We'll try not to cough too. I'm looking forward to it.
All right. Well, I mean, you know, we are doing this via Google Hangout. So if you have some sort of hand motion you want, I can try to cut your sound on my end if you think a cough's coming on.
Okay.
But
will do.
We're trying something new here, hoping the audio's a little bit better. I don't know why my phone. It's for those who have tuned into season 5 so far. I apologize. My phone, for whatever reason, kind of clips audio like at a low level. So I know it's been a little bit soft at times. I've tried to boost that up, but there's a lot of extra feedback. But you didn't tune in to hear about my audio problems on this podcast. You probably tuned in to hear a couple of lifelong K-State fans talk a little bit and reflect a little bit about, of course, the biggest news of the week the past couple of days. Bill Snyder retires after 27 seasons and 30 years at K-State. And Doug, I just, you know, it's around so many beers and tailgates, you know, we've talked about this day for some long time, and it's by and large probably exactly what this program needed, but this program is nothing without Bill Snyder, and it was still a weird day to finally hear that news. How did you react Sunday when the end was finally here?
You know, it was one of those things towards the end where we all kind of felt like maybe this was the time that he needed to retire, and then the news broke and he retires, and you just have this flow over you like, oh crap, it's real. You know, it was just this is one of those surreal moments where you're like, we probably need it for the program to move forward, but it's one of those things where we don't know winning without him.
Exactly. I mean, there's so many great stories out there right now, and if you had a chance to catch Dan Youngman's Miracle in Manhattan documentary for free there when he had it open, I mean, I paid for it a year ago or whenever it first came out, but I'll circle back around to that video here in just a little bit, but it just brought back so much, you know. You can kind of throw your baseball card stats out there, Doug, too, when I'm done, but I'm 33, and so that puts me I'm convinced that most people don't remember anything much earlier than age 4, and when it comes to sports, I didn't quite figure out what sports really were or how to digest them until, you know, like age 7 or something, but I got in at the ground floor of K-State football in the 1993 Copper Bowl, and so, like, literally the first, like, watershed moment for K-State in Bill Snyder's career, you know, I was in, that's where I got in, but that's where I started to take issue a little bit with, there was that older fan base that tried to say, like, man, if you didn't know what football was before Bill Snyder, you don't have the right to comment, and that's probably a rant for later in the podcast, but you're right. It's just so much, like, K-State has zero football tradition without Bill Snyder. Every single good thing that happened for K-State football happened under Bill Snyder, and what this man has done for the university, for the football program, the state of Kansas, even college football as a whole, his impact is far and wide, and this should almost be like a celebration, not as much for that we finally get to move on, but that we had this once-in-a-lifetime person put us in position now to have a football program, a program that lasts beyond just him. And for that, I think I speak for a large number of fans. We're just indebted to this guy for that.
Yeah, and really, community is indebted to him. Manhattan's changed night and day. I even think from when we were in college, Grant, just the impact of the football program and what that's meant to the university, and how the town has grown, and how the culture has really shifted in Manhattan.
Yeah, so let's get into a little bit of, I talked like my first K-State football memory is the '93 Copper Bowl. Now, of course, you have to put that into context a little bit too. I probably would watch more K-State football in 1993 if TV is what it was today. Not every game was broadcast, especially even when K-State started that rise. In 1993, I mean, I'm sure D. Scott Fritchen probably has a ledger somewhere that says K-State played on television 5 times that season or something, but it's, I think for me, and I've been trying to think about my favorite Bill Snyder era memory of all time. There's so many, of course, and there's the easy ones to pluck off from 1998 and 2003. Even I remember, his first retirement, his final game against Missouri. Like, I don't think I quite ever celebrated as much for each touchdown as I did in that game. But I think if I have to just pick one, I'm going to circle back around to the final home game of the 1995 season, the final Big 8 conference home game K-State ever played in, where I attended with, this is my first K-State game I ever went to, and this was the first K-State game that one Blake Seiler attended. And our families, who our parents are friends, actually down the road, a little bit related to his mom's side. It was that day that I remember, I don't remember what age that puts me, like 9, him 10 maybe. We both fell in love with K-State football that day. It was the crowd, the atmosphere, the fanfare, the band, everything that surrounded that. What Bill Snyder had done by the time 1995 rolled around. And K-State lost in heartbreaking fashion, but you could tell that he and I both felt. Now, we obviously went 2 different ways. Here I am sitting behind a microphone, and we know where Blake Seiler has risen to in the same time. But, I mean, man, there was nothing like it ever since attending that first game in person. Who was it? I think Ty Detmer maybe was the quarterback. They did like a double pass behind the line of scrimmage trick play, which ultimately was the go-ahead touchdown. And I remember all the obnoxious Colorado fans chanting Cotton Bowl in the visitors section. But if not for that day, for not that experience, there's no way my mom buys season tickets for the family for the 1996 season, and there's no way that I've gone to. I remember counting up at the 200 win graphic that Zach Carlson did. I mean, I think I witnessed dang near close to like half of those games in person, and I owe it all to that day and to this man.
That's cool. That was really cool. I wish my favorite moment was as cool as that, Grant. I'm gonna go more recent, and it's gonna kind of sound weird, but being at the game, the last game of his first retirement, was a really cool memory. Those things that you cherish and you remember forever. I wish that he would have done it the same way this time, so that we could have that last game, that last home game, vividly. It was against Missouri. We won the game in close with a linebacker interception for a touchdown. I think it was Ted Sims who ran it in. It might have been Brandon Archer. I can't remember.
I think it was Archer.
Yeah. So seeing that happen, and then seeing the video tribute from all of the legends of college football at the time, and his past players, team carry him off the field. That was and one I'll cherish for a long time. And it's too bad we didn't get that same send off like we did the first time he retired.
Yeah, I totally agree. I definitely remember that game, and that's. I'm probably going to go out of order here. It's really hard for me to keep the order of my notes, but I think it's more relevant to talk about it now. When there became this rift in the fan base this year about it's people are calling it generational, and I hate anything where there's a debate about one generation versus the next. I think it's just as we get older, we'll eventually start saying something halfway derogatory about the generation below us. Like, that's just what you do, like, as you get older, right? So I think much of those arguments are petty, but because you and I were in school at that time of that first retirement in 2005, like, yeah, so he had 2 bad seasons back to back, but I remember at the time thinking, like, no, we'll snap out of this. Like, we got this. Like, it was such a shock, that first retirement. Like, it blindsided everybody. No one saw it coming. It had crossed nobody's mind, even after a 4-8 and a 5-7 consecutive seasons. Whereas this go around, when we see this, the writing on the wall from this season, and you could clearly see. I mean, it's been a slow decline with the football program, with certain things we've been able to somehow like hide. I called it. I made the analogy earlier. Freeze the warts. Like, you didn't know if they were ever going to fall off, but we froze the warts for a couple of years. Dr. Scholl's, like, we don't know if the over-the-counter stuff was going to work, but so what I started to take issue with these other people acting like if you didn't see football from 1988 and before, that got so mad at us for saying, guys, I think it's time for Snyder to retire. I was there in 2005, and I did not think that. He was 66 at the time. But the difference is the guy's 79 now. And if you don't retire now, then what? Like, what more is there to accomplish? Yes, we all wished he would have gone out, with a winning record, or at least one last bowl trip. Like, there were so many things that we could have sweetened the pot with that we wished happened, but they just didn't. This was not people my age. I can only speak for me. I'm 33. I know a couple of years older than me, but I'm not trying to push the guy out. It just seemed like it's time. And that got so old, I just couldn't. It was really hard. I had really hard not to bite on some of them on Twitter and things like that. I didn't want to go out looking for a fight. I wished I could just have conversations with people like this that, look, man, it's different this go around. And I hope as fans, I hope that the point in time we're in right now, this, a few days following it, it's Tuesday after the Sunday of the retirement, that we can get a little more unified than divided that it was starting to get at. But I don't know if you have anything to add to that. But I mean, how have you sort of managed your emotions over the past it's been going on like 5-6 weeks with this like fan base kind of split.
Well, and I understand where they're coming from. I didn't grow up, or I didn't witness the change, that happened in 1988 when he took over. He put in a new logo. He put in a new attitude with the team. He did a lot of, amazing things, and they saw a program get built from the ground up. We kind of came in the glory years, and we got to see it in the glory years. And those glory years. That all being said, I agree with you. We see him retire somewhat early. I think even on Go Paracats podcast, Marcus was shocked to find out that he was retiring that year. Fan base was shocked to see him go, and obviously something that he needed to take care of. And at that time, it happened. But at this point in time, for the betterment of the program, I thought it was time for him to retire.
Sorry, we had to pause there briefly for a couple technical difficulties. Again, we are sort of trying to pioneer. We're trying try a new system out. Doug lives down in Wichita. I'm up in the KC metro area. But we left off talking about, it's this rift in the fan base. And I wanted to go back to, I lobbed out earlier in the show about Dan Youngman's Miracle in Manhattan. And the reason I wanted to touch back on that was watching that back, you see the interviews of Snyder from the or not just Snyder, but the athletic director whose name's skipping, or briefly I'm not thinking of Max, or anyway, they talk about how bad the facilities were, and they talk about and how the AD basically just said no, we'll do that, kind of blindly, but didn't know how. But Bill basically said no, the facilities stink here, and we've got to do this, we got to do that, we got to do this, he had this hunger and this attitude about all the things that needed to be in place if they were going to be successful. Fast forward it now to 2018, not just 2018, but like 2012, 13, and he's talking about how he didn't think they needed to upgrade veneer, and he didn't need to, all this stuff is starting to get superficial, and I think that was almost like the start of signs where we could tell he's not. There are character traits that this is not 1989 Bill Snyder. This is 180 degrees of what he came in to do and said we needed to keep up with the Joneses. We need to have facility upgrades. And then all of a sudden, 25 years later, he's saying the exact opposite. And just things like that even this new transfer rule, that was kind of a big topic this year, and he said he didn't like it. And I'm like, but this is a character trait where that's not you, Bill. You were always all about winning in the margins. You were always about, the gray shirt rules, the red shirt rules. You can have your cake and eat it too. You don't have to wait for bowl prep to get real game time experience for some of these freshmen, and you can still give them 4 years after that. It's just all these little things that it's just man, this is not what made you so great. Why are you not doing some of these things anymore? And I want to also touch on, my jumping in point, the 1993 Copper Bowl, which was, again, the first, like I said, the first watershed moment of that time. That also meant that I was hearing from my parents, my uncles, my grandparents, as we were watching this great thing unfold in front of our eyes as they de-pantsed Wyoming Cowboys on ESPN. This is uncharted territory. I knew in 1993 how bad the program historically was because we were at a brand new height. So even though I wasn't there in 1988 to see to see the Stan Parrish and all of the horrific coaches that tried to do things and fell on their faces, and people leaving or coming into the game at the second quarter just to watch the halftime show and leaving, all of that stuff just because I didn't see it, doesn't mean I couldn't appreciate exactly what Bill Snyder meant for this program and what he did. But it's just, I guess I've rambled on too long. I'm sorry, Doug. Kind of lost sight. But if you had anything you wanted to add to that, I need to just shut up for a bit.
No, I absolutely understand where you're coming from, and that's where I understand. Again, like you said, we understand and realize the pains and the struggles that the K-State program had at the time, even though we didn't live it, went through. And I mean that, like you mentioned before, Miracle in Manhattan. That video is amazing. If you didn't get to see it when it was free, I recommend you go out and buy it because it is one of those great videos where it walks you through where it came from to where it is today. And like you said, I think we talked about this over the course of the season with Grant, where we were talking about, Snyder was deemed as the innovator, the guy on the cutting edge of football. And we look at it this year, and we're like, well, this new transfer, why isn't he figuring out how to take advantage of it? Why isn't he seeing more opportunities to take advantage of it? It was confusing to me because a man who praised, even losing a bowl game, the extra practices that those players experience that he talks about freshmen getting in. Why didn't we see more of that happening? Because experience is so valuable. So I think those are the types of things that me and you saw as a fan base. That just we maybe it's time for him to hang up the old headset.
The headset or the Cortezes, yeah. And it's hard because of the technical difficulty we had there, but I don't want this to. I don't know how balanced we are. I didn't want to spend more time talking about negatives of Bill Snyder's career. There's so much to celebrate. I mean, there's celebration, heartbreak. I mean, 2012, 1998. I mean, I was at the TWA Dome in St. Louis, and as an 8th grader, that is the longest ride back from St. Louis of my life. And I've got aunts and uncles that live and cousins that live in St. Louis, so I've made that trip several times. But I was curious if you could pinpoint it to one thing, or well, not one thing, but what would you consider the biggest downfall was of why it didn't work longer, I guess, is what I'll ask. What would you consider Coach Snyder's biggest downfall here as it came to an end?
I think that was the biggest thing. The level of talent that we were bringing in dropped off in the last few years, and I think his old philosophy of you bring in these under the radar guys, you work them and you get the most out of them. But on NCAA has changed so many rules since he started. It's where he could get the advantage of bringing in those underdeveloped or under-heralded guys and work them and get them to play at a different level than what they were rated at. The NCAA has come in and you can't do 2-a-day practices. You can't have 3-a-day practices like he did in the 80s, late 80s, early 90s. That's really where he bred a lot of his success, was just he brought people in that would either, or they would leave the team, and those guys that stayed, they ended up being the guys that were the unsung hero, or the great players of old, the Mark Simoneaus, I wish I could.
Like the John McGraw's, the even Lamar Chapman out of Liberal, finding diamonds in the rough at the right time as well. The state of Kansas isn't like the most fertile recruiting ground, but you also gotta win those in-state guys when you do have like the stars align and you do have legitimate real talent here in the state too.
Yeah, and I think the landscape is football, and unfortunately, we didn't see the right changes happening. Snyder, and I think that's really the biggest downfall for me, was the recruiting and his approach to the recruiting.
Yeah, I think I'd second that. I think I would say, I would probably put more weight on recruiting philosophy than recruiting itself. But obviously that they're related. I think. And to me, if I had to pick something different, though, I would say, I guess the biggest downfall. I mean, it's literally just age. I mean, I think all of us, and it's nothing he can control. Like, we all have to deal with that. There's going to be something that I'm more than likely good at now that when I'm 79, 46 years from now, I'm going to be as good at. And I think the problem is like we don't, it's like the. It's like the toad in the boiling pot of water. Like, we don't necessarily notice from like month to month or year to year what we kind of got a little less good at. But after a decade goes by, we can kind of sit back and reflect and put some perspective. Like, I just can't swing a hammer like I used to. Whatever, fill in the blank. Like anything, we just aren't always going to be able to operate at the top of our game in everything that we once did. And for Bill, I think that was part of part of the deal. It's nobody's fault, but it's still one heck of a career. And I shared this on Twitter Monday morning. You know how you wake up with songs stuck in your head? I had stayed up late watching The Miracle in Manhattan. I didn't get all the way through it before I really was like, I just need to go to bed. But I woke up Monday morning, and what was on repeat instead of a song was the quote, the opportunity for the greatest turnaround in college football exists here today, and it's not one to be taken lightly. And that just kept going on repeat. I mean, this some kind of a sickness for sure. But Bill, you're not listening. I'm not going to kid myself like you are, but for whatever reason, if somebody wanted to clip some audio out of this podcast, I just personally wanted to tell you thanks for that Colorado game that we suffered a defeat in 1995 at home, and Colorado stole our Cotton Bowl bid. Thanks for everything, But with one chapter closing, K-State fans are on the cusp of a brand new chapter opening, a brand new book to be written. The next head coach search is underway. Athletic Director Gene Taylor is doing his thing, if you will. And Doug, I kind of just want to zoom out for a second and ask you, what do you want out of this head coaching search process? If you had to kind of script what this process should look like from your perspective, what does that look like?
I think it would be good if he has some consideration for the Snyder tree, but a willingness to maybe go outside the Snyder tree. Basically, I just want him to find the best available coach out there to take the job.
Yeah, and I think if I had to add to that, for me, you know me, Doug, that I don't really get into recruiting like you do, but I get into coaching searches like I love this time of year, and now it's finally here, happening in my school, and it's kind of weird. Like, I don't know that I enjoy it more or less than. I don't think I enjoy it more. I think I enjoy it less than any other year when I get to fantasize about, oh yeah, this guy's resume looks like it's going to look really good over here. But that all being said, as fans, we all have our own personal sort of hot boards or preferences or leaders in the clubhouse, whatever you want to say. And for me, what I would want out of this process is throw that all out the door, really. And I want to make sure that Gene Taylor is looking at this as objectively as possible, kind of echoing what you said about, yeah, acknowledge the Snyder tree. Yeah, look outside of it. But I don't want the guy to host 3 interviews and make some decision in 3 or 4 days. You don't want him to take too long either and end up having to settle for Charlie Weiss, right? But I just want him to vet candidates because, yes, on the outside there are some people that I think would be great hires, but you get them in that interview room and you start asking the questions you think are valuable to the program, to the university, to what you think a head coach is, Gene Taylor, and if it doesn't fit, only he's going to know those conversations. Only he's going to hear those. And that's what I want out of the process, is just to know that he has, and I don't know if there's a magic number. I guess I'll say like half a dozen, 6 maybe. He's got to interview at least 6 candidates. I think there's 3 kind of that separate themselves from the rest right now. But that's not a competent search if he only interviewed those 3. That's for me what I hope. And we may never know. We may never hear exactly how many candidates he interviewed. But so if specifically though, if you look at it from a head coach perspective, what qualities of a head coach do you think are important in this hire? If you look at it not necessarily from Gene Taylor's shoes, but the next head coach needs to have what if they're hired?
I think proven leadership. I think for me it's important that they at least were a head coach, are a head coach currently. Somebody that can prove that they've been basically a CEO of a football program. We all understand that it's a lot more complicated as a head football coach as opposed to being an assistant coach. Not all assistants can come in and do the job. You have to have a certain mindset. So I ideally would like to have a proven leader that's had some success at a head coaching role. And then secondly, I would want whoever comes in to have at least something in their background that had a successful methodology on either side of the ball, offense or defense. I want to see something that's been proven, that's worked in the last 5 years or so that they've been on a staff and were a coordinator of some sorts. I think those are the most important to me right now.
So I don't want to put words in your mouth, Doug, but you're saying, like, if, let's just say, a candidate came along and only was a special teams coordinator, is maybe not checking some box for you, or
that's right. That's
okay.
Exactly.
Well, I just wanted to clear that up. Wasn't sure if I was paying attention right. Yeah, no, and I like that you mentioned the head coaching experience, just because in this given year, like, this is our year, this is our opportunity. It's been a weird coaching search. It hasn't seemed that wild. So I think we have the opportunity to be a little picky like that in this current climate, this current landscape. And so why settle for a coordinator if a head coach is available? Like, I think I put a lot of value in that experience. Like, that's always one notch better. I'm not saying that an assistant can't come in here and be successful, because that has to happen at some point. You don't ever become a head coach if you don't get to make that jump. And I think there's obviously, amongst K-State fans, there's an asterisk out there for maybe one defensive coordinator out there. And we'll probably talk about that a little bit here in a second. But yeah, why not? Like, it's if there were a lot more jobs open, if you're trying to be more competitive, yeah, you might have to kind of think along the lines of promoting an offensive or defensive coordinator to head coach. But I think in this given year, I think we have that luxury. So, but I think that kind of sets us up for a good, where I wanted to go next with this, and that was just kind of that topic of job jumper versus a lifer. And I think people get hung up on this, like, yeah, we were spoiled. We got to have one guy for 27 seasons, but like, look, Penn State and Nebraska are like the only other jobs I can think of where you had one head coach that went there for life, and then a second followed up and went there for life. And of course, I'm talking about whoever preceded Joe Paterno in like 1867, and whoever who was Nebraska, Tom Osborne, and Bob Devaney were kind of back-to-back coaches. But to me, it's not important. I mean, if we wind up getting a job jumper, and I think we can make a great exhibit about one of the potential candidates, and we'll do that later. But if they're here if they're leaving after 3 years and it's for a blue blood job, they would have had to have had like immense success at K-State for the blue blood program to want to poach him. I don't see how that's a negative thing for the university, for one. And the second part, my opinion, is that if you just went through the list of 130 Division I teams, like, I guarantee, like, I need to just sit down and do this someday, but I doubt more than 20% of the 130 have been at their schools for 7 years or more. Like, it just doesn't happen. Like, that's just not the market rate. Head football coaches don't stay at one place on average for more than probably 6 years. I mean, look at Cliff Kingsbury. He was a prodigal son, and he was only there for 6 years because at the end of the day, he couldn't get it done. So, like, yes, that kind of goes back to, like, would I rather have someone with head coaching experience than assistant? Yes, that's like an extra +1. Would I rather have someone be a lifer at K-State than only being here for 3 to 5 years? Yes, but that's just not realistic. Where do you stand on the job jumper versus the lifer debate?
I would reiterate what you said. We've been spoiled for 27 years with Bill Snyder. I'm okay if somebody comes in here and they jump ship, they're gonna jump ship because they were successful at K-State. And if they were successful here, one, let's say the next head coach is one of those jumpers. And let's say after 3 years we've won, we're at least competing for a Big 12 title. And after that third year, and we've competed for the Big 12 title, he decides to leave for a blue blood job that is down the road. I think that all that does is it's proven, one, that a coach can come in here and prove or win that, and his name is not Snyder. Two, it sets us up for success, because if he's gotten our program back to that level, that means he's recruited a lot of great talent to our school, and that means that there's kids out there that are excited to see that purple and white out there, and that Power Cat go out there and crush some heads. So, I really think that with a jumper, would it like you said, would it be great if we maybe he was going to jump after 4 years or 3 to 4 years, and he ended up staying for his life? That'd be great. But it just doesn't happen that often. Doesn't happen. And it's rare you find a college basketball coach. It's rare you find a coach that stays for a lifetime. And those that are rare that do it are when they like to stay where they're at.
I really like what you said there about the let's just say it's like a 10-3 type of campaign in that third year. Like, yes, there might still be pain involved when that guy leaves, especially if that same guy leaves for a job within the conference. That would hurt. That would hurt a lot. Like, it would suck. But like you said, it would have proved that you can take this job and you can have success, and you don't have to be fill in the blank or Bill Snyder. Like, it's a good program at that point. And I think that's a really strong point you hit on. And so I think with that, Doug, since we've kind of hemmed and hawed around little different examples, different exhibits, it's time to kind of get into you and I's personal hot boards, personal favorites. I'll let you go first, because we decided we would share 3 apiece. And I came up with a list of 6. I think I'm down to 6. So I will try to come up with unique ones based off of your opposites. So, Doug, if you want to lead the way, who is at the moment, who's one of your top picks for the next head coach at Kansas State?
I think Neil Brown would be at the one on top of my list. Current Troy head coach. He served 28-14 there. He wouldn't be that expensive to get out of that job. He's really done a really great job at Troy. I think of the candidates out there, from a coach standpoint, he'd probably be one of the top, if not the top guy, as far as next clothes go, type of a guy. I think he would bring a true leadership quality that I obviously already stated. The current sitting head coach, I would like to see him at least interviewed for the job. Yeah.
Sorry, did you have more?
Yeah, go ahead.
Oh, I was going to say Neil Brown. No, I'm glad you picked him, because he's not on my list, and he does not. I struggle with this one. He does have his record is very impressive though, 28-14, and he's walked into Lincoln, Nebraska, as well as Death Valley and Baton Rouge, and pulled off some great wins. I think they play an exciting brand of football. Like, there's a lot of reasons to say yes for me, but the one I can't get over is, for me, the Sun Belt is the lowest of FBS division, and I know at some point, so what? You had the guy that went to Louisville, but for me, that's the hang-up I can't get over. Like, I think K-State's a program that we should be plucking out of I always thought when this opportunity came up, we should be plucking out of either the Mountain West or the AAC. Like, we should be in position to do that. Now, we don't have that luxury. The market's just not quite there at the moment, but that's my hang-up, is the Sun Belt. And go ahead and you can rebuttal if you want to. That's for me what I can't get over for whatever reason.
I think yes, it's the Sun Belt. I think he has proven himself well enough in the Sun Belt. He's obviously got his program going, really humming along, and I think he shouldn't have age play a factor, but at 38, he's young enough. His alma mater's UMass, so it'd be really hard to see him leaving for an alma mater type job. It would, I think a year job, this coaching carousel. I think a year from now we see him get taken by a bigger name school. I'm not going to lie to myself and say that K-State's the biggest name out there. I think we see him get plucked, and I think it's a great opportunity to pick him up, and I think he's done enough and has proven himself against Power 5 opponents in LSU and Nebraska, gone into their territories and won at their level. I think he understands coaching at this level. At Texas Tech when he was there under Thome Tuberville, I think it'd be an interesting hire. It may not be that splash hire though that the fan base would fall in love with.
Well, see, this is what's the fun part about the coaching search, because for me, it feels like a Tom Asbury hire, where Tom Asbury had great success at Pepperdine, but at the end of the day, it wound up being too big of a differential from Pepperdine to K-State. And yes, this apples and oranges comparison, but that's where I'm reluctant to pull the trigger. But I totally understand the perspective of like the buyer's remorse. Like you were there, you were in the market. It's like not picking up Patrick Mahomes when you were one of the first 12 teams or whatever in front of the Chiefs, things like that. They're Aaron Rodgers, all those people that passed on Aaron Rodgers. I can definitely see how that opportunity could exist. But for me, I'll go with my first candidate, and I guess I'll start with my long shot candidate, just because I think this might help put you at ease of who to go with number 2 and number 3 on your end, because I doubt this guy's on your list. But for me, Brian Harsin is I think is kind of a long shot in someone that checks the box for me of that closes that gap. It's not moving up from the Sun Belt. You're moving up from the Mountain West, and you look at his coaching, first of all, like his moving up the ranks. He was an assistant at Texas, but like he took Arkansas State in his first year, won the conference, the Sun Belt, the same Sun Belt. Of course, is only at 7-5, but then he replaces Chris Peterson at Boise State and doesn't exactly, have Chris Peterson success, but he sits at 59-20 currently, all-time record. Brian Harsin for me is kind of that. I don't really think that's on the table, but I kind of like the sounds of that.
Brian Harsin, huh? Give me one that I have to look up.
All right. Well, yeah, so Brian Harsin basically takes the place after, when the chairs were reshuffled when Dan Hawkins left for Colorado. Chris Peterson gets the job, and then Brian Harsin took Chris Peterson's job. And then he kind of goes out. I thought, for whatever reason I had in my head, I thought he was the offensive coordinator at Auburn before he took the Arkansas State job, but that is not the case. I don't know why my mind went there. But yes, he's currently Boise State's head coach.
All right. So that's a name I hadn't heard yet. So that was good. Good, a little educational. I had to go to Wikipedia to see who the heck you were talking about. But that's awesome. I think that's an interesting pick, just looking at his record and what he's done there. They're tied for first year in the Mountain West, so.
Yeah, and they lost Fresno State in the championship game, I think, in overtime. I think. Again, I shouldn't be using my memory. I should be looking this up. But I think the other thing parallels, so to recruit to Boise, Idaho, and maybe he's not going to have enough recruiting ties to recruit this area well, but I think the understanding of how to sell Boise, Idaho to people is very similar in the culture that exists in Boise, Idaho for this football program. I think is very similar to what I think is very relatable to what Manhattan's like into this fan base and how to bring kids into there. But yeah, if you didn't have much more to add on to the Brian Harsin.
Well, I would pump the brakes on him not having too many ties down here. He did spend a little bit of his career at Texas and Arkansas State, so he's had to have had some recruiting ties in the Texas area, probably the Arkansas area a little bit.
Well, that's
so
true.
I wouldn't say that would be totally out of the picture as far as understanding how to recruit in this area.
Well,
yeah, I like that pick. That was a good one.
Who do you got for one of your other remaining two out of the three?
You know the one I want to get to, but I'm not going to go to that person yet.
I may not. Like, I have a good guess, but I may actually not, depending on which one you go next.
Well, after I would want my second option, and it's always been this way at the beginning of the year. After listening to your podcast, though, from last week, where you interviewed
Zach Barnett
from
Football Scoop.
Yep, thank you, Zach Barnett. Yep, and his complete and utter dismissal, basically, of Jim Leavitt for any viable job. It's began to me to second guess it. I will say this, though. I think he would be a hell of a head coach if K-State gave him the opportunity. I think this would be one of those guys that would come here for the remainder of his coaching career. Move on. He obviously wants to come here, written it into his contract. He's a heck of a defensive guy. One of the boxes that I have in the qualities as far as the methodology proven on one or the other. His defenses are really good. They're stout. Obviously, Oregon defense quite up to snuff, but you saw what he did at Colorado in the 3 years he was at Colorado. He's done a lot of great things in his career. I think you look at him building a program from a trailer to a top 25 team and stuff. I think he knows how to get things done, and he's a guy that obviously wants to come.
Yeah, and I'll add to that, like you said, look at what he did at Colorado, and then now look at what's happened to Colorado ever since he's left, I think is another way to phrase that. They're a shell of themselves since he's left, and they've been a mess, and so that makes you wonder, what does he do for stability for a program? You look at Oregon, who's changed leadership a little bit, and he again has been a stable part over there. And I'll also add, I can't accurately probably timestamp this, but for sure when he was at Colorado, maybe still when he was in Oregon, he knows the Kansas JUCOs. He has relationships in the Kansas JUCOs, and I don't know if he became Kansas State's next head coach, would he be that active in recruiting? I think he probably would, because I don't think he can get that out of his blood. He probably would make in-home visits and stuff. But there's still definitely, I think, and I have to be, he's the candidate for me that I'm most curious about how he would fill out his staff because of his relationships over his coaching career. I mean, he has NFL ties. He has, he has coast-to-coast ties. And he's seen a lot of different styles of play. He's seen a lot of different things. For me, Jim Leavitt, I mean, I'm with you. He was, I think I once told you, if the next head coach is not Jim Leavitt or Brent Venables, there's a good chance I'll be upset. That has actually probably changed. There is something about this guy that it seems like, again, and it related back to Zach's interview last week, that the luster's worn off a little bit for me in him, and I don't know why. And that's not to say, though, if he became K-State's next head coach, would I be disappointed? No. But for whatever reason, he has moved down my list as well. So, number 2 on my list, unless, Doug, did you have anything else on the Leavitt topic that you wanted to hit on?
No, I think we covered it, and I think obviously he's got some dirt in his past, and I think that's what's going to prevent him from getting a head coaching job, unfortunately.
So my number 2, and I think Leavitt, man, I think if I'm being fair, I think Leavitt is I think he's still my runner-up choice, I think. But just to go somewhere else besides you, I think, I kind of like Mike Norvell down at Memphis. Again, it checks that box of I think K-State should be shopping in the AAC Mountain West market for this. Like, that seems appropriate. Now, of course, that it's also dependent on the given year, and this given year doesn't really necessarily have a lot in those markets. But what I like about him is, I mean, and the other thing where I will caution people to sample size is a little small. This is only his second head coaching season. All indications are pointing up, but I would probably tend to want at least three seasons in. I think you can get a better sample size that way. But nonetheless, it still is pointing in the right direction. He was able to take over for Jason Fuente, who left for Virginia Tech, which, I think that's a pretty good parallel. I think there's a lot of parallels you can draw between the program of Virginia Tech and Kansas State's program. Basically the history is based off of one coach. The history is focused around special teams. So for me, Mike Norvell makes a lot of sense. And Ian Boyd for SB Nation wrote a piece for SB Nation about Mike Norvell, and he kind of talked about how unique of his spread principles are that actually include the tight end regularly. And so he sort of tweeted out a link to his story, but he says, are we sure Mike Norvell isn't the best fit for the K-State job? And he goes in and explains the Mike Norvell's tight end inclusive spread offense. So I would encourage the listeners to go out and read his piece. But Doug, your reactions to Mike Norvell?
I love. He would be, what is he, the youngest probably of on the coaching hot boards, on the multiple sites that are out there that have coaching hot boards. Mm-hmm. And he's at 37, so fairly young. Originally from Texas, so he some connections down in Texas for the recruiting ties. Coached for years down at Tulsa. So you feel like he probably has some good connections at Oklahoma, so it kind of checks the boxes for the two recruiting areas that we would want to try to pull from at K-State. So I think he would be an interesting pick. I think he's had yes. Obviously, I think he obviously checks off one of the other boxes of having success as a coordinator at one side of the ball, and that's the offense and what he's been able to do as an offensive-minded coach. With that in mind, before we go to our third pick, Grant, as we're going through our picks and what you're looking at, is offensive-minded head coaches more defense, or is it vice versa?
I think just, these coaching searches or hires tend to be cyclical, right? Or, you kind of like react like opposite of what you had. I think I would tend to want a defensive coordinator because I think, okay, so take a look at like Cliff Kingsbury and how his career didn't end up panning out at Texas Tech. There's no doubt that guy's not a great offensive coordinator, but I almost feel like it's easier to find a guy like Cliff Kingsbury to come in and do crazy offensive things. And for whatever reason, I just kind of feel like, maybe it's a metaphor or like a symbolism of like, think of like a linebacker, making sure everybody's lined up in the right position. They're more about like making sure things are in the right places. And I think those qualities probably tend to, I might just be kind of speaking out of my butt and maybe getting too out there, but I feel like whereas, an offensive person wants control of everything and wants to just go, I just feel like a defensive person might be a better like manager. I don't know. I think I would rather have a defensive someone who came up from the defensive side personally.
That'd be a better delegator maybe on the defensive side is what your analogy is saying. I've wondered this as the coaching search goes on, what I would want. And we've seen, like you said, good offensive minds come into this league. Big 12 is what I'm speaking of. You had a Charlie Weiss come in who failed. You have a Cliff Kingsbury who comes in and fails. And you just wonder, is it great to go out there and get a great offensive mind for your next head coach? I don't think it's. I think it could. I think they could be useful here, but I do worry. I'm still of the Blues defense out there in our league, even though it doesn't look like it every Saturday, where what wins you games. And I think it would be important for us to maybe get a defense.
Yeah, and it's funny now that I'm reflecting more as this is set in a little bit. And the two guys I mentioned, Brian Harsin and Mike Norvell, are definitely offensive guys. So I guess I'm being contradictory, but yeah, no, I think I tend to agree with you.
So that sets me up for my third pick, which is an offensive guy. So I'll go ahead and go down that road that we've been elongating to. Seth Luttrell, who, by all accounts, by multiple website candidates for the K-State job currently. What he would bring to the table would be that offensive mindset. I think his offense is pretty powerful, pretty air raid-ish. Having coached at Texas Tech and understanding the Texas Tech landscape and understanding the air raid offense that he got to coach under at that level, I think it would be interesting to have him bring that into K-State. I think my only just talked about what's more important to you, defense or offense, and my reservation would be who he would have as his defensive coordinator, and whether or not that guy would be somebody that he could bring in. What I thought was interesting, I think you're right on the money. I think Levitt, of all the coaches out there on the coaching hot boards, Levitt would probably bring in the best staff. Nobody else that could doubt that. I don't think anybody could argue. My worry is with these younger coaches not having the ties that these like Jim Levitt would have. Is what kind of a staff he would bring in. So that would be my only reservation about Seth Luttrell. I think it would be a home run hire. I say that, all those bad things about his hire, and then I say it would be a home run hire. I think it would be a lot of youth, a lot of energy. He's not the youngest for the board. He's at 40, but I think he brings in a lot of energy that would infuse into the K-State. Would be exciting in press conferences. I think he would be for the recruits to interact with. I think he would do really good recruiting the areas that he's good in Oklahoma, being a native of Oklahoma, and for several years now. I think he would be a fun hire, and I think a lot of K-State fans would be happy with it.
Yeah, so for me, Seth Luttrell kind of goes full circle on a couple things we hit on in this podcast, which is now nearing the hour mark. But for one, the Dan Youngman, the Miracle in Manhattan documentary. Okay, so first 3 years on the job, Snyder, the clips they showed of him answering questions by the press, I think that's this very similar attitude that Seth Luttrell has. From what I've seen of him, he just kind of has this edge to him. Not too much where it's abrasive, but it's you don't dare talk down about my team or doubt what we can accomplish, and I like that. Now, gone from veneer, if Seth Luttrell comes in, are probably going to be the suit coats because he's a boots and jeans guy. Is his famous quote, but there's that, and it goes back to, I made the comment about it's either Venables or Levitt or I'm upset. This is an example of why I hope Gene Taylor does make sure or has done his research and has like at least 6 candidates, because this name never came up, Doug, until a couple weeks ago before we like when we were tailgating. We never once thought about this, but this guy, by all accounts, like does seem like the real deal. Checks a lot of boxes. You know what? I think he absolutely understands the value of a good K-State program, having been the fullback in 2001 for Oklahoma. Like, he gets it. He understands how awesome it is to play in our stadium. He gets all those little things. And we circle back around to that job jumper versus lifer. That's the only job he's going to leave for. But I'm not convinced that Lincoln Riley's not going to be at Norman, Oklahoma for a long time. And it's not a foregone conclusion either. He could fall in love with the place too. Like, everybody, like, yes, he's probably more likely to go back to his alma mater and stay at my school, but it's not like there's a 0% chance of that happening. So Seth Luttrell really is the appealing candidate. It's really hard not to look at it and kind of scale some things up. Now, he's kind of in between. I would put Conference USA out of the group of 5, behind the 2 conferences I kept talking about, but definitely in front of the MAC and Conference USA. I think they're the MAC and the Sun Belt. I think they're kind of middle of the road like that. And I did look up their defensive stats. They were 6th in their conference. They have a 14-team conference in Conference USA. So kind of middle of the pack in total defense. And so, yes, I too, like you, I hope he keeps, if he comes to K-State, I hope Seth Dagey comes with him. Or wait, did I get that? I think I'm making up the wrong Tech quarterback. Who's the Graham Harrell, offensive coordinator? I hope he brings, but I too, like you, I'm very interested in understanding like who he's going to bring in as a defensive coordinator. I think that, of course, I can't be unbiased if you heard my anecdote earlier in the show about a defensive coordinator, so I can't really insert opinion here. But Doug, yeah, I'm with you. I'm all in on the Seth Luttrell train, and I think he's probably my number 1 as well. But for the sake of transparency, unless you have something to add, I'll go on to another candidate.
Yeah. I add one more thing on Seth Luttrell, and how poetic would it be just when we stole from North Texas with a game drive, and we would steal probably one of their best coaches in a long time if Seth Luttrell did come to K-State. It'd be very, very poetic, if you will.
And this might be like maybe only the 3rd or 4th time we've dropped Zach Barnett's name on this podcast. From last week's episode, but knowing how close he is to the North Texas program, again, I will try to leave a link in the description below this podcast if you found it through the homepage of GoPowerCat.com. And I forgot once again to shout out a thanks to Fitz and his crew for letting us have this opportunity. Seth wrote a great piece on, it's basically convincing people how the job jumper is not a bad thing. He knew Seth Luttrell was going to be the real deal. He wrote this 2-3 years ago when Seth Luttrell was hired at North Texas. I encourage everybody to go read that piece because it's just spot on, and I think it's very relatable for K-State fans. Hire this guy and don't worry about how long he is or is not at Kansas State. So with that, I will go for the final candidate, and I think I owe it to K-State fans. Honestly, I've let go of this one probably, since interviewing Zach, and when he came out publicly at the Clemson press conference, Brent Venables, the prodigal son, the linebacker who played under Jim Leavitt, who played with Kirby Hocutt down at Texas Tech, the AD down there. Look, I just don't think it's going to happen. It makes so much sense for so many reasons. But at this point, if you don't believe that this guy just doesn't really want to become the head coach, always just wants to be the bridesmaid, kind of likes this gig as defensive coordinator and being played pretty well, I think you're wasting a lot of time and emotion and fooling yourself that you think this is still an opportunity. But if we're gonna look at it in a vacuum and look at it in fantasy land, this guy just makes so much sense for so many reasons. Great recruiter. He's plucked some of the best talent out of Kansas once or twice to go play at Clemson. But Brent Venables, I mean, it's not just because Clemson is the program it is what it is right now. It's also because of what Oklahoma did under his tutelage. I mean, we've seen what that defense has turned into after Brent Venables left. But Doug, I just don't personally see value in spending a whole lot of time talking about this guy because I just don't see it happening. But tell me what maybe you like or don't like about the prospect of a Brent Venables hire.
Well, I think he checks off, the box of being successful on one side of the ball or the other. I think he brings a lot of energy. I think he would be great. I think the fan base would be just ecstatic with this hire. But my reservations all come in at the same level yours does. He's been successful for how many years now? And he's had opportunities in quote-unquote been interviewed by colleges. And they've either moved on to different candidates or he's decided to stay where he's at. You never know what really is going on there, but it doesn't seem like, this is going to be the prodigal son returning. I think he's happy and fine where he's at. As far as his son and his promise to his son, look, he would be able to bring his son to K-State and still coach his son at K-State. I mean, I don't put a lot of credence into that, but maybe his son really likes Clemson and really wants to stay at Clemson. I don't know. But I think he for whatever reason, he's not going to probably be the next head coach at K-State, much to the chagrin of probably a good chunk of our fan base.
Yeah, I gave up on I don't know, maybe it was damage control. Maybe he was trying to just hedge off being disappointed or something long ago, but the writing on the wall, I mean, the Clemson pressers, what just put it, just basically extinguished it for me once and for all. And I was kind of hanging on by a thread anyway up until that point. But is his son currently a freshman? Because you talk about transfer rules. You would hate to, if he is a freshman right now, you would hate to move the family. And you also have to remember, yes, we all love K-State. For me, my mom went there. I grew up here. I told you the story about being indoctrinated into football, getting in at the ground floor of this success. But if he's 18 years old, and, that means he spent 10 years in Oklahoma and 8 years in South Carolina, he could have fallen in love with Clemson football from the very first game he went there. So that's his dream. We can't do anything about that. So, we had some other topics we might touch on in this podcast, but due to time, and Doug, I know you've got a flight coming up tomorrow. Probably shouldn't just keep going on and on. I'll let you close with any coaching search thoughts, but I did just want to briefly say, this is Tuesday, December 4th. Hopefully when this gets uploaded Thursday, this isn't too dated of references, but hopefully Gene Taylor doesn't hire somebody by then, because then this podcast will be irrelevant. But Alex Delton announces he's transferring today, and then, of course, the basketball team struggled out on the road against Marquette. But, Doug, if you wanted to comment on any of those, or just kind of tie a bow on the coaching search hot board topic, the floor is all yours.
Yeah, I think I'll go ahead and tie a bow and then touch on both of those. The coaching search, I think Gene Taylor's going to do a good job. I think he was obviously brought in here for this specific job of hiring the next football coach, even though probably many of us thought he was going to have to hire two coaches when he came in. But I think he's going to do the right thing. I do like the fact that he basically sent out a statement and said, "Hey, don't even ask me any questions. I'll let you know when the search is done." I think he's very focused, and I think he will be objective in who he picks for the next K-State head coach. As far as Alex Delton moving on, I thought what he did on Twitter was class act. He thanked the K-State fans, said that he'll always be a part of our family, and I think he will. He graduated, or he's going to graduate in January. He's moving on to a different school. for that graduate transfer rule. I don't blame him. He's put his blood, sweat, and tears into our program the last 4 years, and watching him play against KU, watching him play against Texas Tech. I'm sorry, not Texas Tech. But watching him play against KU, and that second half where he just came in and was the battering ram for our offense and really won that game for us. Those are the things that we'll never be able to say thank you to him for in person. And obviously he's not going to listen to this podcast, but thank you, Alex Delton, for your time.
Well, and not before you hit on the basketball team, and then obviously the Cactus Bowl was something else for him as well. This was a Kansas-born kid, and you wished it would have maybe turned out a little differently, but I don't blame the kid either. Yeah, it's easy for me in these situations to take my fan hat off and tip it in the direction of, go get yourself some more playing time somewhere else and use that. That rule's there for a reason, so go use it.
And then lastly, the basketball team and their struggles at Marquette. It was a tough game to watch, to say the least. Our team was just, flat is the way I'd probably describe it. We were still in the game, which is what was crazy about it. We didn't play that well. Foul trouble was abound, and yet we were still kind of in the game. That was a mark of a good team. I think K-State's going to bounce back from it. I think on the road, refs were calling the game tight, and the team just didn't seem like they could bounce back or adjust to the way the game was being called. So I think we'll be fine. I think, if anything, it was a good time of year to lose. We lose early. Hopefully that injects some energy into the upcoming games, and obviously before conference play. To lose a tough true road game like that shouldn't hurt our resume too much, and gives us an opportunity to get better before the conference starts.
Well, Doug, before we sign off, remind the listeners how they can follow you on both Twitter as well as Wabash Station.
So my Twitter handle is EMAWroc. That's EMA and then ROCH. And then I am CatRoc on the message boards. That's CatRoc.
And for myself, GTCat _ EMAWdio. So that's EMAWdio on Twitter. And GTCat on Wabash Station. Guys, thanks for tuning in. Thanks for making it all the way to the end of this marathon of a podcast. I hope you enjoyed it. It's exciting times. It's time for celebration, like I said earlier in the show. Celebrate what Bill has turned this program into, this university, our beloved university, the one we love to talk about. But that'll do it for this episode. Until next time, peace out.
EMA, everybody.